Hey guys, tonight we are leaving the noise of the world behind. We are going up into the high hills where the air is thin and cold. We are joining the shepherd in his tiny wooden hut on wheels. This is a story about solitude, nature, and the peace of a simple life. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, pull your blanket up, listen to the wind in the grass, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. High in the hills, where the earth rises and folds into waves of ancient stone and moorland grass, there exists a place that the world has forgotten. Not forgotten in the sense of abandonment, but forgotten in the way that quiet things are overlooked by those who move too quickly, speak too loudly, think too much about tomorrow, and not enough about the eternal present moment that stretches across these windswept heights like a blessing. You are standing here now, in this place between earth and sky, where the air moves differently than it does in the valleys below. It is thinner here, cleaner, carrying with it the scent of heather and wild thyme, the sharp mineral smell of exposed rock, and something else, something you cannot quite name, but that you recognize in the deepest part of your being as the smell of distance, of vastness, of solitude that is not loneliness, but rather its opposite, a kind of completeness that only comes when you are alone with the fundamental elements of existence. The village lies far below, so far that it appears as nothing more than a scattering of amber pinpricks against the darkening landscape, like embers that have escaped from some great fire and settled into the valley to glow their slow, patient glow through the descending night. You can see the church tower, barely, a grey finger pointing upward, reminding the villagers of heaven even as they go about their earthbound business. You can see the smoke rising from cooking fires, thin columns that bend and disperse in the wind long before they reach your elevation. But those lights, that smoke, that distant evidence of human habitation and human industry, all of it seems impossibly remote from where you stand now. Not distant merely in terms of physical space, though there are perhaps 3 miles of rough terrain between you and the nearest cottage, but distant in a way that transcends simple measurement. It is as if you have climbed not just up the hillside, but up through layers of time itself, up through the accumulated noise and confusion of human society, up into a place where things are older, simpler, more true. The silence here is not an absence of sound, but a presence in itself. It has texture and weight. It presses against your ears like deep water, not uncomfortably, but with an insistence that demands acknowledgement. This is a silence that has existed since before human voices first named these hills, since before sheep were domesticated and brought to graze these heights, since before even the standing stones were raised on the ridgeline to the north, those grey sentinels that mark some forgotten boundary or celebrate some ancient alignment of earth and star. And yet the silence is not complete, never complete, because there is the wind, always the wind. It moves across these heights with a sound that is both whisper and song, both sigh and breath. It flows through the heather like invisible water, bending the tough little plants in waves that ripple across the hillside in patterns that seem almost deliberate, almost conscious, as if the wind itself were a living thing with intentions and moods and memory. The heather is purple now, in its late summer bloom, though the color is muted by the failing light, turned to shades of gray and violet and deep indigo. In a few weeks it will begin to brown, and then the winter will come and cover everything in frost and occasionally snow, and the shepherd's work will become harder, more vigilant, more urgent. But for now, in this moment, the heather is still blooming, and its scent rises with each gust of wind, sweet and slightly resinous, mixing with the smell of the sheep and the grass and the coming night. You are alone here, but you are not lonely. This is an important distinction, perhaps the most important distinction, because loneliness is a kind of pain, a sense of something missing, a hole in the fabric of your existence that needs filling. But what you feel here, standing on this hillside as the darkness gathers in the valleys below and the first stars begin to appear overhead, is not loneliness. It is solitude, which is loneliness's wiser, calmer cousin. Solitude is chosen, welcomed, even cherished. It is the condition of being alone without the ache of absence, the state of existing in your own company, and finding that company sufficient, even nourishing. The people in the village below, with their clustered cottages, and their shared wells, and their gossip, and their quarrels, and their marriages, and their christenings, and their funerals, they would pity you perhaps, if they thought about you at all. They would imagine that your life up here must be hard, joyless, empty. They would wonder what you do with your time, how you fill the long hours of darkness, what you think about when there is no one to talk to, nothing to distract you from the relentless march of your own thoughts. But they would be wrong. Not about the hardness. The work here is hard, physical and demanding and sometimes dangerous, but wrong about the emptiness. There is no emptiness here. The space around you is filled, absolutely filled with presence. The presence of the land itself, ancient and patient and enduring. The presence of the sky, vast and changing and eternal. The presence of the sheep, your charges, your responsibility, your purpose. And the presence of something else, something that has no name but that you feel as surely as you feel the wind on your face, a kind of watchfulness, a kind of attention, as if the hills themselves were aware of you, aware of all living things that move across their surface, and regarded you not with indifference, but with something approaching benevolence. The monks in the abbey to the east would call this presence God. The old women in the village who still remember the stories their grandmothers told would call it something else, something older, something that was here before the monks came with their bells and their Latin and their certainty. You do not call it anything. You simply feel it, acknowledge it, live within it as a fish lives within water, as a bird lives within air. The light is almost gone now. The sun has long since dropped behind the western ridge, and the afterglow is fading from gold to rose to a deep, luminous blue that seems to emanate from the sky itself, rather than from any external source of light. This is the hour between day and night, the threshold time, when the world seems to pause and take breath before transitioning from one state to another. It is a liminal time, a time when boundaries become permeable, when the ordinary world seems to thin and you can sense, almost see, the presence of other realms pressing close. The sheep sense it too. You can hear them settling, their movement across the hillside slowing, their calls to one another becoming less frequent, more subdued. They are gathering themselves for the night, clustering together for warmth and safety, their instincts as old as their species telling them that darkness brings vulnerability, that the hours of night are when the wolf hunts, even though there have been no wolves in these hills for 200 years. But you are here now to be their wolf guard, their protector, their shepherd. This is why you live up here in the solitude, why you sleep so little, why you keep your vigil through the dark hours. Not because wolves still hunt, but because foxes do, and because sheep are foolish creatures, prone to wandering, prone to getting themselves caught in brambles or stuck in bogs, or lost in the mist that sometimes descends on these heights without warning, thick and white and utterly disorienting. And because this is your life, the life you were born into, or perhaps the life you chose, it is hard to remember now which came first, the choosing or the circumstance. Your father was a shepherd, and his father before him, and somewhere back in the dim reaches of family memory, there is a story about an ancestor who came to these hills from somewhere else, somewhere to the south, fleeing something or seeking something, and who found work with the flocks and never left. So perhaps it is in your blood, this affinity for solitude, this comfort with wind and weather, this ability to read the sky and the land, to know when rain is coming by the way the sheep cluster, to know when a ewe is about to lamb by the way she separates herself from the flock, to know when danger approaches by the behavior of the birds, the sudden silence, the sudden flight. You turn now toward your home, your sanctuary, your tiny kingdom on wheels. It sits about 50 paces away, on a relatively flat piece of ground where the grass is short and tough, cropped by generations of sheep into a kind of natural lawn. In the gathering darkness, the hut is barely visible, just a darker shape against the dark hillside, a rectangular shadow with the faint suggestion of a door. The shepherd's hut is not much to look at, never has been, never will be. It was not built for beauty, but for function, for practicality, for the simple purpose of providing shelter in a landscape where shelter is precious and often scarce. It is a small box, perhaps 12 feet long and 6 feet wide, constructed from thick planks of oak that were never planed or treated or finished in any way. The wood is rough and grey with age and weather, split in places, warped in others, but still solid, still strong, still proof against the wind and rain that are the constant companions of life at this elevation. The hut sits on a frame of iron, a chassis with 4 wheels, each wheel as tall as your knee, made of wood reinforced with iron bands. The wheels allow the hut to be moved, though not easily and not often, from one grazing area to another as the seasons change and the flock needs fresh pasture. Moving the hut requires a team of oxen and a full day's work and much cursing and adjustment, but it can be done. And this mobility, limited as it is what makes the shepherd's life possible, what allows you to follow the flock rather than forcing the flock to come to you. The wheels are old as the hut itself, which is to say older than your grandfather, possibly older than the village church. The wood has darkened to almost black, and the iron is orange with rust in places, though still strong enough to bear the weight. When the hut moves, which it has not done for 2 years now, the wheels creak and groan like old bones, and they leave deep ruts in the soft ground that fill with water and become tiny temporary ponds where sheep come to drink. But the hut is not moving now. It is settled, grounded, as permanent as anything can be in this landscape where nothing is truly permanent except the hills themselves, and perhaps not even them. Given enough time, given the slow grinding work of wind and water and frost. The hut is your fixed point, your anchor, your still center in a world of movement and change. You walk toward it now, your feet finding the familiar path through the heather without conscious thought. You have walked this path so many times that your body knows it, knows the slight rise and fall of the ground, knows where the hidden rocks are, knows where the ground is soft and where it is firm. You could walk it blind, could walk it in the complete darkness that will come in another hour when the last light has drained from the sky and the moon has not yet risen. As you approach the hut, the smell reaches you first, before you can make out any details in the darkness. It is a complex smell, layered and rich, not entirely pleasant to someone unused to it, but deeply familiar and even comforting to you. The base note is the smell of old wool, that particular musty, slightly oily scent that wool takes on after it has been compressed and used and lived with for years. Mixed with that is the smell of wood, the dry, tannic smell of old oak, and the smell of smoke, old smoke, soaked into every fiber of the hut's construction. Smoke from countless fires, fires for warmth, fires for cooking, fires simply for the comfort of flame in the darkness. There is also the smell of sheep, of course, because it is impossible to live among sheep, to work with them day after day, to handle them and herd them and sometimes carry them, without the smell of sheep becoming part of your own smell, part of the smell of everything you own and touch and inhabit. It is a warm smell, animal and earthy, the smell of lanolin and grass and dung, and that indefinable essence that is simply sheep, the smell of wool still on the living creature, warm and slightly damp. And underneath all of these, or perhaps woven through all of these, is your own smell, the smell of a man who lives alone and has no reason to be concerned with how he smells, who washes when it rains and sometimes not even then, who wears the same clothes day after day until they become like a second skin, who exists in a state of easy accommodation with his own body and its various emissions and odors. To you, this combination of smells is not unpleasant. It is the smell of home, of safety, of the known and the familiar. When you are away from the hut for any length of time, moving through the flock or checking the boundaries of the grazing area or searching for a lost lamb, You can smell the hut from a surprising distance, and that smell is always welcome, always a beacon drawing you back. You reach the door now, which is not really a door, but a piece of canvas stretched over a wooden frame, designed to keep out the worst of the weather while still allowing air to circulate. The canvas is stiff with age and oil, and it makes a particular rustling sound when you push it aside, a sound you hear multiple times every day, but that never quite becomes background noise, never quite disappears into the category of things your mind no longer registers. You step up, there is a single wooden step, a thick plank worn smooth by countless entries and exits, and then you are inside, and the space enfolds you like an embrace, like the arms of a mother, like the comfort of a known place where you can finally relax, finally stop being vigilant, finally just be. The interior of the hut is so small that the word room hardly seems appropriate. It is more like a container, a box, a cocoon. From the door you can reach out and touch both side walls without extending your arms fully. The length of the hut is perhaps 4 paces, and much of that is taken up by the narrow bed built into the far end, a simple frame with rope webbing strung tight to support a thin mattress stuffed with wool and heather. But this smallness, which might feel oppressive or claustrophobic to someone used to larger spaces, to houses with multiple rooms and high ceilings and windows that let in the sun, this smallness is exactly right. It is not a limitation but a perfection, a space sized precisely for one person, for you, for your needs and your life and your existence. There is no waste here, no excess, no room for anything that is not essential. Every inch of space serves a purpose. Every object has its place. The shepherd's hut is a lesson in economy, in efficiency, in the art of living with exactly what you need and nothing more. The walls are bare wood, unadorned except for a few hooks hammered into the planks where you hang things, your spare shirt, your leather pouch, your shears, your crook. The ceiling is low enough that you cannot stand fully upright in the center, though you can stand at the edges where the roof slopes down to meet the walls. But you rarely stand in here anyway. There is not much call for standing. You sit on the edge of the bed, or you crouch by the stove, or you lie down to sleep. And these are the 3 positions that encompass almost all of your time inside the hut. The floor is wooden planks, gapped and uneven, with bits of wool and dirt caught between them. You could sweep it, and sometimes you do, pushing the debris out through the door with a bundle of heather tied together to make a rough broom. But the floor is never truly clean and never will be, and you have stopped being concerned about it, stopped even noticing it, except in the abstract way that you notice things that are so familiar they have become invisible. Light is scarce in here even during the day, because there is only one small window, a square opening cut into the wall near the door, covered with oiled cloth that lets in a dim, diffused glow but no clear view. At night, like now, the window admits only darkness, and the interior of the hut is black, except for whatever light you make yourself. But before you make light, before you light the candle or stir up the fire, you stand here in the darkness for a moment, letting your eyes adjust, letting your other senses come forward. You can hear your own breathing, steady and deep, and you can hear the wind outside, muffled now by the walls, changed from a living presence to a distant murmur. You can smell the smells you noted before, intensified now by being enclosed, concentrated in this small space. You can feel the air on your skin, cool still, but already different from the air outside, already beginning to carry the stored warmth of the hut, the warmth that the wood has absorbed during the day and is now slowly releasing. This is your space, your territory, your domain. You have lived here for 5 years, ever since your father became too old for the hills and passed the flock and the hut and the responsibility to you. Before that, you lived in a hut not unlike this one on another hillside to the south. And before that you were a boy in the village, learning the trade from your father, following him up into the hills during the summer months, sleeping outside or in rough shelters. slowly being initiated into the mysteries of the shepherd's craft. But this hut, this particular collection of old wood and iron, has become more than just a shelter to you. It has become an extension of your being, a physical manifestation of your inner state. The order you maintain in here, the specific placement of objects, the routines you follow, all of these reflect and reinforce something essential about who you are, about how you understand your place in the world. You move now to the far corner where the stove sits, and your hands find the familiar shapes in the darkness without hesitation. The stove is a small cast iron box, perhaps 2 feet tall and a foot on each side, with a flat top and a door in the front, and a pipe that rises up through a hole in the roof. It is old, older than the hut, salvaged from some other use, some other life, before it found its way up here into the hills. The iron is rough under your fingers, pitted and textured, cold now, but capable of holding heat for hours. Once it gets going, radiating warmth that in this small space becomes almost overwhelming, turns the hut into a little oven, makes you sweat even as the wind howls outside and the temperature drops toward freezing. You open the door, and the smell of old ash rises up, dry and acrid. There are still coals from this morning's fire. You can feel their heat when you hold your hand over them. Not hot enough to burn, but warm enough to tell you they are still alive, still capable of being coaxed back into flame if you feed them carefully, give them air and fuel and attention. You reach for the kindling box, which sits beside the stove, and your fingers sort through the contents by touch. Twigs, mostly, gathered from the stunted hawthorn trees that grow in the gullies, and some heather stems, dried until they are brittle, and some pieces of peat, cut from the bog at the edge of the grazing area and stacked in the sun to dry during the summer months. The peat is your primary fuel up here where wood is scarce. It burns slowly, with a sullen, smouldering heat, and a smoke that is thick and peaty and strangely comforting once you become accustomed to it. But to get the peat burning, you need kindling, need flame first, need to build up enough heat to drive the moisture from the dense, compressed plant matter and get it to catch. You select the smallest, driest twigs and arrange them in a loose pile over the coals, leaving gaps for air to flow, creating a structure that is as much about architecture as it is about fuel. Fire needs air, needs space to breathe, needs the right geometry to thrive. You have learned this through years of practice, through countless fires built in all kinds of weather, in rain and wind and even snow. Fires that sometimes caught on the first try, and sometimes required patience and persistence, and sometimes simply refused, died despite your best efforts, leaving you cold and frustrated and wondering what you did wrong. But tonight the fire comes easily. You blow gently on the coals, and they glow brighter, red then orange, and the twigs begin to smoke, and then one catches, a small flame, yellow and wavering, and then another, and suddenly there is fire, actual fire, light and heat emerging from darkness and cold, that ancient magic that humans have been performing since the beginning of human time. You add more twigs, slightly larger ones, building the fire up gradually, and the light in the hut increases, pushing back the darkness, revealing the familiar space in all its humble detail. The shadows dance on the walls, flickering and shifting with the movement of the flames, and the iron of the stove begins to tick and ping as it expands with the heat. When the fire is strong enough, you add a piece of peat, placing it carefully on top of the burning twigs. The peat smokes heavily at first, white smoke that makes your eyes water, but you leave the stove door open to give it air, and gradually the smoke lessens, and the peat begins to glow, and you know the fire has taken hold, will sustain itself now for hours with only minimal attention. You close the stove door, leaving it slightly ajar to maintain the draft, and reach for the kettle that sits on the floor beside the stove. It is a simple thing, blackened iron with a wire handle, dented and ancient. You shake it to check for water, hear the reassuring slosh, and place it on top of the stove where the heat is most intense. The kettle will take time to boil, 10 minutes perhaps, and you settle back on your heels, watching the fire through the gap in the door, listening to the beginning of the kettle's song, that quiet simmering that will build gradually to a full hum. A sound that is one of the most pleasant and companionable sounds you know. A sound that speaks of comfort and hot drinks and the pushing back of cold and darkness. The heat from the stove is already filling the hut, and you feel your muscles beginning to relax, feel the tension of the day starting to drain away. The hut warms quickly, its small volume meaning that even the modest heat output of the stove is enough to raise the temperature noticeably. Within minutes you can feel the difference, can sense the air losing its bite, becoming softer, more forgiving. You stand now, as much as the low ceiling allows, and move to the bed where your spare blanket lies folded. The blanket is wool, of course. Everything here is wool, thick and heavy and slightly scratchy, woven by someone in the village decades ago, woven tight to shed water and hold heat. You shake it out and drape it over the door frame, an extra layer of insulation against the night air, and the canvas door settles into stillness, no longer rustling with the wind. The kettle is humming now, a low drone that rises and falls slightly as the water moves inside it, heated unevenly by the cast iron surface beneath it. You have tea in a small cloth bag hanging from one of the wall hooks, real tea, expensive tea, brought up from the village 3 months ago when you went down to deliver wool and receive your wages. You drink it sparingly, making one handful of leaves last for weeks, brewing it weak and then weaker still as you reuse the same leaves, until they have given up all their flavor and become just brown fragments that you finally throw into the fire. But tonight you will have tea, proper tea, brewed fresh and strong, because tonight feels like a night that calls for small luxuries, small comforts, small acknowledgments of the goodness of being alive and warm and safe in a harsh world. You take down the bag and open it, and the smell of the tea leaves rises up, sharp and astringent and exotic, a smell that speaks of places you will never see, warm lands far to the south, and east where plants you cannot imagine grow in soil you have never touched. The leaves are black and twisted, each one like a tiny sculpture, and you place a generous pinch of them in your wooden cup, your only cup, carved from a single piece of birch by your father when you were a boy. The kettle is singing now, a fuller sound, insistent, demanding attention, and you lift it from the stove using a rag to protect your hand from the hot metal. The water inside is roiling, ready, and you pour it over the tea leaves, watching as they swirl and dance in the cup, releasing their color and flavor, turning the water from clear to amber to dark brown in the space of seconds. The steam rises, carrying the scent of the tea, and you hold the cup close to your face, letting the warm vapor bathe your skin, breathing in the fragrance, feeling it clear your sinuses and sharpen your senses. This is a ritual, small and private and entirely yours, a moment of pure appreciation, of gratitude for the simple fact of warmth and shelter and sustenance. You set the cup down on the small shelf that runs along the wall, a narrow plank nailed there for exactly this purpose, and you move to the door, pushing aside the blanket and the canvas, stepping out into the night air once more. The contrast is immediate and striking, the warmth of the hut giving way to the cool darkness, the enclosed space opening up into vastness. Your eyes, adjusted to the firelight, struggle with the darkness, and for a moment you can see almost nothing, just vague shapes and the suggestion of the landscape. But gradually your vision returns, adapts, and the night reveals itself. The sky is scattered with stars now, more stars than you can count, more stars than there are sheep in all the flocks, in all the hills, in all the world, it seems. They are brilliant up here, away from any competing light, sharp white points against the black void, and you know some of their patterns, the shapes your father taught you, the hunter and the plough and the crown, though you do not remember all the names and do not need to, because the stars exist whether you name them or not. The moon is rising, just clearing the eastern ridge, still low but already bright enough to cast shadows, to turn the landscape into a study in silver and black. It is waxing toward full, perhaps 2 nights away from fullness, and its light makes the world strange and beautiful, makes familiar things unfamiliar, makes the ordinary extraordinary. And in that moonlight you can see them, your flock, your responsibility, your reason for being here. They are settled for the night, spread across the hillside below the hut, a sea of white wool that seems to glow in the lunar illumination. There are perhaps 300 of them, 300 individual animals, though you rarely think of them as individuals except for a few. The lead ewe, the bellwether with her bronze bell, the old ram who is clever and stubborn and sometimes challenging. Mostly you think of them as a single organism, the flock, a collective entity that moves and breathes and exists as one. They are your flock, entrusted to you by the Lord who owns the land and the sheep, and theoretically owns you as well, though that ownership is abstract and distant, manifesting mainly as a demand for wool and meat and the occasional lamb to pay as rent. From here you cannot hear individual sheep, but you can hear the flock, the soft, constant sound of their presence, a white noise made up of thousands of small sounds, the tearing of grass as they graze, the shifting of hooves, the occasional cough or sneeze or bleat. It is a sound you have lived with for so long that it has become like your own heartbeat, something you are always aware of on some level, but rarely consciously notice unless it changes, unless something disrupts the pattern. And then there is the bell, the bellwether's bell, hanging from a leather strap around the neck of the lead ewe. It is bronze, old bronze turned green in places, and it has a deep, mellow tone that carries across the hillside. The ewe moves her head as she grazes, and the bell sounds, not constantly, but in a slow, irregular rhythm, a gentle clunk that rises above the other sounds, a musical punctuation, a reminder that the flock is there, is settled, is safe. You watch them for a long moment, these creatures who are both your wards and your livelihood, who depend on you completely and who you depend on equally, though in different ways. They are not intelligent. Sheep are not intelligent. They are prey animals with prey animal brains, capable of fear and hunger and a limited range of social behaviors, but not of thought as you understand thought, not of reflection or planning or imagination. And yet you have a relationship with them, a connection that goes beyond simple utility. You know their patterns, their preferences, their quirks. You know which ewes are good mothers and which ones abandon their lambs. You know which rams are aggressive and need watching and which ones are gentle. You know the sound the flock makes when it is content versus, when it is nervous versus, when it is frightened. And they know you, or at least they know your presence, your smell, your voice. They do not flee when you approach, except for the young lambs who have not yet learned that you are safe. They allow you to move among them, to handle them, to guide them. This trust, limited and conditional as it is something you value, something you have earned through patience and consistency, and the daily proof that you are their protector, not their predator. The night is cold now, properly cold, and you can see your breath, pale clouds that appear and disappear with each exhalation. The wind has dropped somewhat, no longer the constant presence it was earlier, but it still moves across the hillside in gusts, ruffling the wool on the sheep's backs, stirring the heather, bringing with it the scent of the moors, peat and water and growing things. You turn back to the hut, pulling the canvas and blanket aside, stepping back into the warmth. The contrast makes you aware of how cold you had become in those few minutes outside, and you move immediately to the stove, holding your hands over it, feeling the heat radiating upward, soaking into your palms and fingers. Your tea is still hot, still steaming, and you pick up the cup and take a long drink. The liquid is bitter and strong and perfect, warming you from the inside, spreading its heat through your chest and stomach. You drink slowly, savoring it, making it last, and between sips you feed another piece of peat into the stove, ensuring the fire will burn through the night, will be there in the morning when you wake, still producing heat even if it has burned down to coals. The hut is fully warm now, almost too warm, and you remove your outer layer, a long sheepskin vest that you wear over your tunic. The vest is heavy, cured with the wool still on, turned inside so the fleece is against your body. It smells strongly of sheep and smoke, and you, an aromatic trinity that defines the shepherd's existence. Beneath the vest you wear a tunic of rough wool, undyed, the natural color of the sheep, which is a creamy white with hints of gray and brown, depending on which sheep the wool came from. The tunic is long, falling to your knees, with wide sleeves and a simple cut, no embellishment, no decoration, just function. It is thick enough to provide warmth, loose enough to allow movement, and strong enough to withstand the rough use it receives. The wool of the tunic is felted, not woven, beaten and compressed and worked with water until the fibers lock together into a dense mat that is nearly waterproof, that sheds rain like the fleece on a living sheep sheds rain, letting the water run off rather than soaking through. This felting is an old technique, older than weaving, older than spinning perhaps, a way of turning raw wool directly into fabric without the need for threads or looms. Your leggings are the same material, felted wool wrapped and tied at the waist and ankles, and over these you wear leather boots that come up to your shins, stiff leather that has been oiled until it is dark and flexible and reasonably water-resistant. The boots are lined with more wool, sheep's wool of course, because everything here is sheep's wool, and your feet inside them are warm, even when the ground is wet or frozen or covered in snow. On your hands you have mittens rather than gloves, thick shapeless bags of felted wool that hang from cords around your neck, so you cannot lose them. Mittens are better than gloves for warmth, because the fingers can share heat, can curl together into a collective fist that generates and conserves more warmth than individual digits ever could. But you are not wearing the mittens now, not in the warmth of the hut, and your hands are free, the skin rough and calloused and stained from work and weather, the nails broken and dark, the knuckles enlarged from years of cold and use. They are not beautiful hands, not soft or delicate or suitable for any fine work, but they are capable hands, strong hands, hands that can grip a struggling lamb or splice a rope or pack a wound with cobwebs and moss to stop bleeding. You finish your tea and set the cup aside, and you realize suddenly how tired you are, how the warmth of the hut and the fullness of your belly, modest as that fullness is, have combined to create a heavy, pleasant drowsiness that makes your eyelids droop and your limbs feel weighted. But there is still one task to perform before you can rest, one responsibility that cannot be postponed. You need to check the flock one more time, need to make a circuit of the hillside, need to ensure that all is well, that no sheep has wandered off, that no predator is stalking close, that the night is as peaceful as it seems. You pull on your vest again, not because you want to, but because you must, and you step back out into the night. The moon is higher now, well clear of the ridge, and its light has strengthened, making the landscape almost bright, certainly bright enough to walk by, bright enough to count sheep by. Your companion is waiting for you just outside the door, sitting in the patient way of dogs who have learned that humans move slowly, and that waiting is part of the relationship. She does not leap up when you emerge, does not bark or wag with excessive enthusiasm, but simply rises to her feet and looks at you with eyes that catch and reflect the moonlight, turning them briefly into coins of silver fire. Her name is Meg, though you rarely use her name except when you want her attention specifically, when you need to call her back from some task or correct some behavior. Most of the time you communicate with her through whistles and hand gestures and body language, a vocabulary of signals that she understands as well as you understand words, perhaps better, because this language is older than words, more fundamental, rooted in the ancient partnership between humans and dogs. Meg is a sheepdog, purpose-bred through generations to work with flocks, and everything about her reflects that purpose. She is medium-sized, neither large nor small, with a long coat of black and white fur that is thick and slightly coarse, designed to shed water and resist cold. Her ears are pricked forward, always alert, always listening, and her tail curves up over her back when she is working, a flag of concentration and intent. Her body is lean and muscular, built for endurance rather than speed, though she is fast when she needs to be, capable of sudden bursts of acceleration that let her cut off a straying sheep or chase down a lamb that is fleeing in panic. But mostly, she works at a trot, a ground-eating pace that she can maintain for hours, moving around the flock, positioning herself where she needs to be, responding to your signals with a precision that still amazes you even after years of working together. You found Meg as a puppy, or rather she found you, wandering into your camp one night 5 years ago when you were still working for your father on the southern hills. She was half-starved and covered in burrs, clearly lost or abandoned, and you fed her scraps from your dinner and expected her to leave by morning. But she stayed, and something in her eyes, some quality of intelligence and willingness, made you decide to keep her, to train her, to see if she had the instinct for the work. And she did. She had it in abundance, that mysterious quality that makes a good sheepdog, that combination of focus and control and responsiveness that cannot be fully taught but must be present in the animal from birth. You trained her using the methods your father had taught you, methods passed down through generations of shepherds, starting with simple commands, sit and stay and come, building gradually to the more complex work of moving sheep, gathering them, splitting them, holding them in place. She learned quickly, almost too quickly, sometimes anticipating what you wanted before you signaled it, and you had to teach her patience, teach her to wait for the command, to trust that you knew the plan even if she could see the solution more clearly. Now she is fully trained, as good a sheepdog as you have ever worked with, better perhaps than any except the legendary dog your grandfather owned, a black and white collie named Tam, who was said to be able to gather a scattered flock with no commands at all, who knew what needed to be done and simply did it, who worked with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Meg is not quite Tam, not yet. She is still young and occasionally impulsive, but she is very good, good enough that you trust her completely, trust her to do the work you cannot do yourself, to be in places you cannot be, to see things you cannot see. She is your partner in this work, not your servant, and the relationship between you is one of mutual respect and even affection, though you rarely express that affection in obvious ways. She walks beside you now as you move down the hillside toward the flock, not at heel but slightly ahead and to the side, positioning herself where she can see both you and the sheep, where she can monitor the situation and respond to any change. Her ears are moving constantly, swiveling to catch sounds from different directions, and her nose is working, testing the air for scents that might indicate danger or disruption. The sheep are calm, barely reacting to your approach, except for a few that lift their heads from grazing to watch you pass. They know you, know your shape and your smell and the particular rhythm of your movement, and they know that your presence at night usually means nothing, just the shepherd making his rounds, just the familiar routine of checking and counting and ensuring safety. You walk the perimeter of the flock, which has settled into a loose oval shape on the hillside, with the youngest lambs and their mothers in the center and the older sheep arrayed around the edges. This is their natural formation, their instinctive response to the vulnerability of night, a defensive arrangement that puts the most precious members of the flock in the most protected position. Meg moves with you, sometimes ranging out ahead to check on a sheep that seems isolated or to investigate a sound in the heather. She works independently, but always with awareness of your presence, always ready to respond if you whistle or call. This independence is part of what makes her valuable, because you cannot be everywhere, cannot see everything, and you need a partner who can make decisions, who can respond to situations as they develop. The bellwether is near the center of the flock, her bell silent now as she rests, lying down with her legs folded beneath her. She is an old ewe, grey-muzzled and wise in the ways of the flock, and the other sheep look to her for guidance, follow her lead when the flock moves. You selected her for this role 3 years ago, chose her because of her calm temperament and her tendency to graze in good locations and her general good sense. The bell she wears is important, not just for the sound it makes, but for the authority it confers. The other sheep recognize the bell as a marker of leadership, and they are more likely to follow the bellwether than they would be to follow any other sheep. This makes your work easier, because instead of having to move the entire flock, you often only need to move the bellwether, and the others will follow. You count as you walk, not a full count, but a rough assessment, your eyes scanning the mass of white wool, looking for gaps, for absences, for anything that seems wrong. The count comes up about right, 312, though you cannot be certain in this light, and you make a mental note to do a proper count in the morning, using the gate at the lower end of the grazing area to funnel the sheep past you one by one so you can be sure of the exact number. Everything seems well. The flock is settled, the night is quiet, the moon is bright, and Meg shows no signs of concern. You stand for a moment at the top of the hillside, looking out over the sleeping sheep, feeling the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that these animals depend on you, that their survival is in your hands. It is a weight you have carried for so long that it has become part of you, inseparable from your sense of self. You are a shepherd, and being a shepherd means accepting this weight, accepting that you will sleep lightly, that you will wake at strange sounds, that you will put the flock's needs before your own comfort, before your own safety sometimes. But it is not a burden, not really, because it is also a purpose, a meaning, a way of being in the world that feels right and true and aligned with something deep in your nature. You were made for this work, or the work was made for you, and the distinction does not matter because the result is the same. A life that feels complete, even in its hardship, even in its solitude. You whistle for Meg, a low, soft note, and she comes immediately, trotting up the hill to your side. You rest your hand on her head for a moment, feeling the warmth of her through the thick fur, and she leans slightly into the touch, accepting the affection without fuss. Then you turn back toward the hut, back toward warmth and rest, and she follows, her duty done for now, though she will wake if you wake, will respond if the flock needs her, will work through the night if necessary without complaint. The hut welcomes you back, its small lit interior a beacon of comfort in the vast darkness. You bar the door, a simple wooden beam that drops into brackets, more to keep the wind from blowing the canvas open than to keep out any intruder. There are no intruders up here, no bandits or thieves or wandering soldiers. There is nothing to steal except sheep, and stealing sheep requires daylight and time and the kind of organized effort that leaves traces. Meg settles herself by the stove, curling into a tight ball with her nose tucked under her tail, and within seconds she is asleep, her breathing deep and even, her body relaxed completely. Dogs have this ability, this capacity to transition instantly from alertness to rest, and you envy it sometimes, because your own mind is slower to settle, slower to release the day's concerns and surrender to sleep. You sit on the edge of the bed, pulling off your boots, feeling the relief as your feet are freed from the stiff leather. Your feet ache, they always ache, the price of a life spent walking on rough ground, climbing hills, standing in cold water. You massage them briefly, pressing your thumbs into the soles, feeling the tightness in the muscles, the swelling around the joints. The bed is hard, the rope webbing offering little cushioning, but the wool mattress helps, and you have learned to sleep on much worse. Learn to sleep on bare ground when necessary, curled around a fire, using your arm as a pillow. The bed is a luxury, really, something you are grateful for even as you take it for granted. You lie down fully clothed, pulling the heavy wool blanket over yourself, and the blanket's weight is comforting, pressing down on you, holding you in place. The stove is still radiating heat, keeping the hut warm, and through the small window you can see a patch of night sky, stars visible through the old cloth, faint and wavering but present. Your body begins to relax, muscles unclenching, joints settling, breathing slowing. The sounds of the night come through the walls, muted but clear enough. The wind, the distant murmur of the flock, the occasional call of a night bird, an owl perhaps, hunting over the moors. These sounds do not disturb you, they soothe you. They are the sounds of the world continuing, the world at peace, the world in order. But sleep does not come immediately. It rarely does. Your mind, freed from the demands of physical work, begins to wander, begins to circle through thoughts and memories and observations, begins to perform the quiet work of processing the day, of noting what was learned, what was seen, what needs attention tomorrow. You think about the ewe in the south section who was limping slightly, need to check her hoof in the morning, probably just a stone but could be foot rot, need to catch her and examine her. You think about the fence line on the western boundary. One of the posts is loose, leaning, need to brace it before it falls completely. You think about the weather, the way the clouds were moving this evening, the particular quality of the wind, and you try to read in these signs what tomorrow will bring, whether it will rain, whether the temperature will drop, whether you need to move the flock to more sheltered ground. These thoughts are not worries, exactly. They are more like items on a list, things to remember, things to attend to. They do not agitate you, they simply occupy your mind, keeping it engaged until the deeper processes of relaxation can take over, until your consciousness begins to dim and blur at the edges. But there is one thought that persists, one idea that keeps circulating, and it is this: the strange privilege of this life, the unexpected gift of living so close to the rhythms of nature, so close to the essential patterns of existence. In the village below, people live according to the clock and the calendar, according to market days and holy days and work schedules imposed from outside. But up here, you live according to the sun and the seasons, according to the needs of the flock, according to a time that is older and slower and more patient. It is not an easy life. No one would claim it is easy, but it is a real life, an authentic life, a life that feels connected to something fundamental. You are not wealthy. You will never be wealthy. You own almost nothing. Your entire existence fits into this small hut with room to spare. But you are rich in time, rich in silence, rich in the particular satisfaction that comes from doing work that matters, work that has been done for thousands of years, work that connects you to an ancient lineage of men and women who stood on hills like this one, and watched over flocks like this one, and felt the same wind and saw the same stars. And with that thought, that sense of connection to something larger and older and more enduring than yourself, sleep finally comes, sliding over you like water, like darkness, like the softest wool, pulling you down into dreams that are simple and pastoral, dreams of hillsides and sheep and endless sky. But even in sleep, you remain aware, on some level, of the world around you. Your ears continue to monitor the sounds of the night, alert for anything unusual, anything that might signal danger or disruption. Your body continues to regulate the temperature, adjusting the blanket unconsciously, shifting position to maintain comfort. And some part of your mind remains on duty, remains the shepherd even in dreams, remains ready to wake if the flock needs you, if Meg alerts, if the night changes its character from peaceful to threatening. This is the shepherd's sleep, light and interrupted and never fully restful, but sufficient, enough to sustain you, enough to restore the energy you will need for tomorrow's work. You have learned to function on this kind of sleep, learned to take rest in small increments throughout the day, a few minutes leaning against a rock, a brief drowse while the flock grazes peacefully, the accumulated fragments of rest adding up to something approaching adequate. The night deepens around the hut, the moon tracking across the sky, the stars wheeling in their ancient patterns. The flock sleeps and wakes and sleeps again, the sheep shifting position, standing to graze for a few minutes before lying back down. The wind continues its eternal conversation with the heather, speaking in a language of sighs and whispers that no human will ever fully understand. And in the hut, the fire burns down to coals. the light dimming until there is only a faint red glow from the stove's open door, and Meg dreams whatever dreams dogs dream, her paws twitching, her ears moving, her throat making small sounds that might be quiet barks in some canine dreamscape. Hours pass, uncounted and unmarked, except by the moon's progress and the slow rotation of the night sky. And then, in that darkest hour just before dawn, when the moon has set and the stars are at their brightest and the world seems to hold its breath, you wake. Not suddenly, not with alarm, but gradually, rising up through layers of sleep like a swimmer rising through deep water toward light. You lie still for a moment, listening, trying to determine what woke you, whether it was some external sound or simply the internal clock that regulates your sleep patterns, that wakes you at roughly the same hour every night regardless of when you went to bed. The hut is cold now, the fire having burned down to nothing, and you can see your breath in the faint starlight that comes through the window. Meg is awake too. You can tell by the change in her breathing, the alertness in her posture, though she has not moved from her spot by the stove. You rise, wrapping the blanket around your shoulders, and move to the door, easing aside the canvas to look out. The world is dark, the darkness before dawn that seems deeper and more absolute than any other darkness, as if the night has gathered all its strength for one final assertion before surrendering to the inevitable approach of day. But your eyes adjust, and gradually the landscape reveals itself, the familiar shapes of the hillside, the pale mass of the flock below, the distant ridgeline sharp against the sky. Everything is still, quiet, at peace. Whatever woke you was nothing, or nothing you can identify, and you are about to return to bed when you hear it. The bell. The bellwether's bell, sounding once, twice, 3 times in quick succession, the rhythm wrong, too fast, too urgent. And you know immediately that something is wrong, that the flock is disturbed, that your vigilance is needed. You pull on your boots, not bothering to lace them, grab your crook from its place by the door, and step out into the cold. Meg is already moving, flowing past you like a shadow, down the hillside toward the flock, and you follow, your feet finding the path automatically even in the darkness. As you approach, you can hear the sheep, not the quiet sounds of settled animals, but the anxious bleating of alarm, and you can see movement in the flock, a stirring, a swirling, as if something has passed through them, disturbing their rest. You move to the bellwether, checking her first, and she is standing, tense but unharmed, her bell still swinging from the movement of her head. Around her the other sheep are milling, unsettled, their eyes wide in the darkness. Meg circles the flock, keeping them together, preventing them from scattering, her body low and her movements controlled. You scan the perimeter, looking for what caused the disturbance, and for a moment you see nothing, just the dark hillside, the heather, the rocks. But then, at the edge of your vision, you catch movement, a shape darker than the darkness, low to the ground, moving fast. A fox. Not a major threat. Foxes rarely take healthy adult sheep, but they will kill lambs if given the chance, and the flock knows this, knows the fox as an ancient enemy, and their fear is instinctive and immediate. You shout, a wordless sound that carries across the hillside, and you start moving toward where you saw the fox, your crook raised. Meg is ahead of you, already on the scent, and you hear her bark, sharp and aggressive, a sound she rarely makes, but that means she has found the intruder. You reach the spot, and the fox is gone, vanished into the heather, but you can smell it, that sharp, musky scent that is unmistakably fox, and you know it was real, not imagination. Meg casts around, checking for any lambs that might be injured or missing, but the flock count seems right, and after a few minutes of searching you are satisfied that the fox took nothing, managed nothing, was simply passing through and happened to disturb the sheep. But the damage is done in terms of the flock's peace. They will be nervous now for the rest of the night, harder to settle, prone to starting at sounds. You move among them, speaking quietly, not words so much as sounds, low, reassuring tones that tell them the danger has passed, that the shepherd is here, that they are safe. Gradually they begin to calm, the bleating diminishing, the movement slowing, the flock reforming into its defensive oval. The bellwether lies down again, and this is the signal the others need, and one by one they follow her example, settling back into rest. You remain with them for a while longer, standing guard, making your presence known, and Meg sits beside you, panting slightly from the exertion, her tongue lolling, her eyes still scanning the darkness for any further threat. The sky to the east is beginning to change, not lightening yet, but losing some of its depth, the black fading to a dark blue that suggests dawn is not far off. Soon the stars will dim, the sun will rise, and the night's vigil will be over. But for now you stand here in the darkness with your dog and your flock, feeling the weight of the shepherd's role, the endless responsibility, the constant vigilance. It is exhausting, sometimes, this never being fully off duty, this always having to be ready, always having to respond. But it is also, in a strange way, sustaining, because it gives your life structure and meaning, because it connects you to something larger than yourself. You look at Meg, and she looks back at you, and in that exchange of glances there is understanding, partnership, a shared purpose. You are in this together, you and the dog, working toward the same goal, protecting the same flock, serving the same ancient need. And the sheep, oblivious now to your presence, to your sacrifice, to your sleepless nights, settle back into their dreams, trusting that you will keep them safe, trusting that the shepherd is watching, trusting in a way that only sheep can trust, complete and unquestioning and absolute. The wind picks up again, bringing with it the scent of morning, that particular smell of dew forming on grass, of earth preparing to wake, of the cycle beginning again as it has begun again every morning since the world began. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders and watch as the darkness slowly, inevitably, begins to fade. This is your life. This is your calling. This is what it means to be a shepherd on the high hills, alone but not lonely, tired but not weary, living a life that the world below might pity, but that you would not trade for any other. And as the first true light of dawn begins to touch the eastern sky, turning it from blue to gray to the faintest hint of gold, you think about the day ahead, about the work that needs doing, about the fence post, and the limping ewe and the 100 other small tasks that make up the shepherd's existence. But before the day can truly begin, before the sun rises and the work calls, you have this moment, this quiet in-between time, and you use it to do what shepherds have done for thousands of years, what your father did and his father before him, what shepherds will do for thousands of years to come, if shepherds still exist in those far-off times. You count your sheep. Not a rough count this time, but a proper count, a real count, moving among them as they lie drowsing, touching each one with your crook as you pass, speaking the numbers in the old way, the shepherd's way, the counting rhyme that has been passed down through generations, that exists in slightly different forms in different regions, but that serves the same purpose everywhere. To enumerate the flock, to ensure that all are present, to create a rhythm that helps the mind focus and the count remain accurate. Yan, you say, touching the first sheep, the word feeling ancient in your mouth, a sound that is more than just a number, that carries with it the weight of tradition. Tan, touching the second, the syllable rolling off your tongue like a stone rolling down a hill. Tethera, and the rhythm is established now, the pattern forming, the counting rhyme pulling you into its cadence. Methera, pethera, pimp, sethera, lethera, hovera, dovera, the words coming faster now as you move through the flock, your hand on each sheep's back, your crook marking each one, your mind focused entirely on the count. Dick, Yandick, Tandick, Tetheradick, Metheradick, Bumfit, Yana Bumfit, Tanna Bumfit, Tethera Bumfit, Methera Bumfit, Jiggit. The words are nonsense to anyone who does not know the system, meaningless syllables. But to you they are numbers, as clear and precise as 1, 2, 3. But older, much older, a counting system that predates written numbers, that predates Latin, that reaches back into a time when the language of these hills was something other than the English you speak in the village, something Celtic, or older still, something whose origins are lost in the mists of prehistory. You continue counting, your voice falling into a chant, a rhythmic recitation that has an almost hypnotic quality that pulls you deeper into the work, that makes the counting not just a task but a meditation, a trance state. The sheep do not react to your touch or your voice. They are accustomed to both, and your passage through the flock is like wind through grass, noticed but not disruptive, acknowledged but not alarming. Yana jigget, Tana jigget, Tether a jigget, Mether a jigget, Bumford a jigget, and on and on. The numbers climbing, the count growing, and with each word you feel yourself sinking deeper into the rhythm. Feel the outside world fading. Feel yourself becoming nothing but the count, nothing but the numbers, nothing but the ancient practice of enumeration. The counting continues, the rhythm never wavering, your voice steady and low, and the flock becomes not 300 individual animals, but a series of numbers, a progression, a sequence that unfolds according to the old pattern, the old words. Dick a jigget, you say, and then the pattern resets, and you begin again with Yan, but now with a mental note that you have passed 20, that you are into the second score, and your mind keeps track of the scores even as your voice continues the pattern within each score. This is how shepherds have always counted large flocks, not by trying to hold hundreds of numbers in mind at once, but by breaking the count into manageable chunks, into scores, into groups of 20, and then counting the scores separately. You make a small mark in the ground with your crook each time you complete a score, a scratch in the dirt that you can see and verify, a physical record of the count's progress. The work continues, patient and methodical, and there is something deeply satisfying about it, about the precision, about the completion of each score, about the steady accumulation of knowledge, the growing certainty that you know exactly how many sheep you have, that none are missing, that the flock is whole. Yan, Tan, Tethera, Methera, Pethera, the words flow like water, like breath, like the beating of your heart. And you are not thinking anymore, not in the normal sense. You are simply counting, simply being the count, simply performing this ancient ritual that connects you to every shepherd who has ever lived. The sky continues to lighten, the dawn spreading across the eastern horizon like a slow fire, and the sheep begin to stir more actively now, sensing the approach of day, preparing to rise and begin their grazing. But you continue counting, undistracted, focused, moving through the flock with steady purpose. Bumpfit, Yana Bumpfit, Tana Bumpfit, and the rhythm is so deeply established now that you could count in your sleep, could count while thinking about other things. But you do not. You give the count your full attention, because this matters, because knowing the exact number of your sheep is not a trivial concern, but a vital one, the foundation of everything else you do. You pass the bellwether, her bell silent now as she lies still, and you touch her with particular care, particular gratitude, because she is the leader, the one the others follow, and her well-being is more important than any other single sheep's. Tether a jigget, Mether a jigget, Bumford a jigget, and you make another mark in the ground, another score completed, another 20 sheep accounted for. The count goes on, and on and on, and time loses meaning. There is only the count, only the numbers, only the endless progression of Yan Tan Tethera Methera, until finally, you touch the last sheep, a young ewe at the edge of the flock, and you say the final number, and the count is complete. 312. The same number as last night's rough count, which means no sheep were taken by the fox, no sheep wandered off in the darkness, no sheep fell into a hidden pool or got caught in a bramble, or suffered any of the 100 small disasters that can befall sheep in the night. The flock is whole, the flock is safe. And this knowledge settles into your chest like warmth, like satisfaction, like the fulfillment of duty. You stand there among the sheep as they begin to rise and stretch and prepare for the day's grazing, and you feel the exhaustion of the night's interrupted sleep, the weariness in your muscles, the ache in your feet. But you also feel the contentment that comes from work done well, from responsibility met, from the simple fact of having kept your promise, the unspoken promise you make every night to the sheep and to yourself and to the Lord who owns them, and to the long line of shepherds whose tradition you carry forward. Meg comes to your side, her work done as well, and you reach down and scratch behind her ears, and she leans into your hand with a small sound of pleasure. You and the dog and you, partners in this ancient work, companions in this solitary life. The sun breaks the horizon now, a bright edge of gold that sends long shadows racing across the hillside, and the night is officially over, the new day officially begun. The sheep, fully awake now, begin to move, to graze, to spread out across the hillside in search of the best grass, and you watch them with the particular attention of someone who knows exactly what he is looking for, who can spot a limp or a cough or a ewe standing apart from the flock at 100 paces. But for just this moment, this brief moment between night and day, between sleep and waking, between the count and the work, you allow yourself to simply stand here, to simply be here, to simply exist in this place that is your home, your workplace, your entire world. The hills stretch away in all directions, fold upon fold of moorland grass and heather and exposed stone, and somewhere in the valleys below the village is waking, smoke rising from chimneys, people beginning their own days, their own work, their own lives. But up here on this high hillside, there is only you and the dog and the flock and the wind and the newly risen sun. And it is enough. More than enough. It is everything. The day passes in its familiar rhythm, the work of shepherding that is both monotonous and endlessly varied. The same tasks repeated, but never quite the same because the sheep are different each day. The weather is different. The land itself seems to shift and change in subtle ways that only long familiarity can detect. You move with the flock as they graze across the hillside, watching for trouble, checking the weak ones, the old ones, the young ones, ensuring that none stray too far, that none show signs of illness or injury. The limping ewe you noticed yesterday, you catch her mid-morning, cornering her with Meg's help against a natural fence of rocks, and you examine her hoof, finding as you suspected a small stone wedged between the hard outer wall and the softer inner pad. You remove it with the tip of your knife, and the ewe jerks away from you as soon as you release her, rejoining the flock at a trot, the limp already less pronounced. By tomorrow it will be gone entirely, and she will have forgotten the discomfort, forgotten your intervention, forgotten everything except the endless present moment of being a sheep. You mend the fence post in the afternoon, bracing it with rocks and retying the woven hazel branches that form the fence itself, work that is tedious but necessary, work that you do with the same patient attention you give to everything else. The fence is not to keep the sheep in. They rarely test boundaries when the grazing is good, but to mark the edge of your lord's land, to prevent disputes with neighboring flocks, to maintain the invisible but important lines that divide the hills into territories. By late afternoon, the light is beginning to change again, taking on that particular golden quality that comes in the hour before sunset, and you feel the day winding down. Feel your body responding to the approaching evening with a subtle shift in energy, a turning inward, a preparation for the different work of night. You guide the flock back toward the area around the hut, not forcing them, but simply positioning yourself so that their natural movement carries them in the right direction. And Meg works the edges, gently discouraging any sheep that seems inclined to wander further afield. It is a slow process, this gathering, requiring patience and a light touch, because sheep will resist obvious pressure but will follow gentle suggestion, will move where you want them to move if you make them think it was their idea. By the time the sun is touching the western ridge, the flock is settled in roughly the same area they occupied last night, and you can relax slightly, can let your vigilance ease just a fraction, knowing that the immediate work is done and the evening stretches ahead with its own quieter rhythms. You return to the hut as the shadows lengthen, Meg at your heels, and the interior welcomes you with its familiar smells and its close, warm air. The fire has gone out during the day, as you knew it would, and the hut is cool but not cold, the thick oak walls having held some of the warmth from the morning. You rebuild the fire, going through the same ritual as last night, the careful arrangement of kindling, the coaxing of flame from ember, the gradual addition of fuel until the fire is self-sustaining. The kettle goes on the stove again, and while you wait for it to heat, you turn to the work that occupies many of your evening hours, the work that keeps your hands busy and your mind quiet. From a wooden box under the bed, you take out a piece of ash wood, about as long as your forearm and as thick as your wrist, pale and smooth-grained. A branch you cut 3 weeks ago from a fallen tree in the gully and have been letting dry in the hut ever since. The wood is ready now. The moisture content dropped to the point where it will carve cleanly without tearing or splintering, where it will hold the shape you give it. You also take out your knife, your carving knife, which is different from the larger knife you carry on your belt for general work. This knife is smaller, the blade perhaps 3 inches long, made of good steel that holds an edge well, the handle carved from a piece of deer antler that fits your hand perfectly, worn smooth by years of use, until it feels like an extension of your fingers. The knife is sharp, very sharp, because a dull knife is dangerous, requires force, is prone to slipping and cutting things you do not want cut, like your own flesh. You keep the knife sharp with a whetstone, stropping the blade against the fine-grained rock until the edge will shave hair from your arm, until you can feel with your thumb, carefully, the slight burr that indicates the metal has been worked to its finest possible point. You settle on the edge of the bed, the piece of ash wood in your left hand, the knife in your right, and you begin to work. Tonight you are making a spoon, a simple eating spoon to replace the one you lost last month when you dropped it into the stream while washing it, and the current carried it away before you could retrieve it. You have been using a wooden cup to eat your stew since then, lifting it to your mouth and drinking the liquid, fishing out the pieces of vegetable and meat with your fingers. But you miss the spoon, miss the civilized feel of it, the connection it provides to the world of proper meals and tables and the small dignities of eating. The first cuts are the roughest, the removal of excess wood to establish the basic shape. You hold the branch firmly and draw the knife toward you, the blade biting into the wood with a soft sound, part scrape and part whisper, and a thin shaving curls away from the edge, pale cream-colored, releasing the fresh scent of ash. The smell is clean and slightly sweet, entirely different from the smell of oak, which is more tannic and astringent, or the smell of pine, which is resinous and sharp. Each wood has its own scent, its own character, its own way of responding to the blade, and you know them all, have carved them all, have learned through long practice which woods are best for which purposes. Ash is good for spoons, strong enough to resist breaking, but soft enough to carve without excessive effort, with a grain that is straight and predictable, that does not have the wild swirls and knots that make some woods difficult to work. The spoon you are making will last for years if you treat it well, if you do not leave it in water, if you oil it occasionally with a bit of rendered fat to keep the wood from drying out and cracking. You work slowly, methodically, removing wood in thin layers, checking the shape constantly, turning the piece in your hand to see it from all angles. There is no hurry, no deadline, no one waiting for this spoon except yourself, and the work itself is as valuable as the finished object, perhaps more valuable, because the work fills time, occupies the mind, provides a focus for attention that prevents brooding, prevents the kind of circular thinking that can plague someone who lives alone. The rhythm of the carving is meditative, the repeated motion of hand and blade, the steady accumulation of shavings at your feet, the gradual emergence of form from formlessness. You are not creating something so much as revealing it, finding the spoon that already exists within the wood, bringing it out into visibility through the patient removal of everything that is not spoon. The handle takes shape first, a smooth cylinder that tapers slightly toward the end where your fingers will grip it. The wood worked down until it is comfortable in the hand, until it feels right when you test it, closing your fingers around it, imagining the motion of lifting food to your mouth. Then you begin on the bowl of the spoon, the more difficult part, the part that requires care and precision. You use the point of the knife to outline the depression, scoring a line that marks the boundary between the bowl and the rim, and then you begin to hollow it out, making a series of small cuts, each one removing a tiny amount of wood, each one going slightly deeper than the last. This is delicate work, requiring concentration, because if you go too deep, you will cut through the bottom and ruin the spoon, and if you go unevenly, the bowl will be lopsided, will not hold liquid properly. You work by feel as much as by sight, your fingers constantly checking the thickness of the wood, monitoring the progress of the hollowing. The shavings that come from this part of the work are smaller, finer, more like dust than the long curls that came from shaping the handle, and they catch in the grain of the wood, requiring you to stop periodically and blow them away, sending up a small cloud of pale particles that drift in the warm air rising from the stove. The kettle is humming again, has been humming for some time, but you are absorbed in the work and do not pause to make tea, do not want to break the flow of concentration, the state of mind where hand and eye and intention are perfectly aligned, where the knife moves exactly as you want it to move, where the wood responds exactly as you expect it to respond. Meg watches you from her place by the stove, her head on her paws, her eyes half closed. But you can tell she is not sleeping, just resting, just being present in the way that dogs are present, aware of everything without being focused on anything in particular. Occasionally, her eyes track the movement of the knife, following the steady rhythm of your hands, but she makes no sound, offers no disturbance, content to simply be here with you in the warm hut while the darkness gathers outside. The light from the fire flickers across your work, making the wood seem to move, to breathe, and you have to be careful not to let the shifting shadows fool your eyes, not to misjudge depth or angle because of the unstable illumination. You have worked by firelight for so many years that you are accustomed to it, know how to compensate for it, but it still requires attention, still demands a level of care that would not be necessary in daylight. The bowl of the spoon deepens, slowly, patiently, and you can feel it becoming right, becoming what it needs to be. The thickness of the wood is even now, thin enough to be elegant but thick enough to be strong, and the curve is smooth and regular, pleasing to the eye and to the hand. You begin to refine the shape, making smaller and smaller cuts, removing the tiniest slivers of wood, smoothing away any irregularities, any bumps or ridges that would make the spoon uncomfortable to use. This is the work that separates a functional object from a beautiful one, this attention to detail, this refusal to accept good enough, this insistence on right. Your father taught you this, taught you that tools and utensils deserve the same care and respect as any other work, that there is no virtue in doing a job poorly even if no one will see it, even if no one will know except yourself. The quality of your work is a measure of your character, he said, and whether you are carving a spoon or building a fence or tending sheep, you should do it as well as you know how, not for praise or recognition, but because that is what it means to live with integrity. You think about him sometimes when you carve, remember his hands, gnarled and spotted with age, but still steady, still sure, capable of the finest detailed work even when he was old, and his eyes were failing. He carved you a whistle once, when you were a boy, carved it from a piece of willow in an afternoon, working by the fire in the cottage while outside the rain fell, and the wind blew, and the world was grey and cold. The whistle had a clear, pure tone, and you played it constantly for weeks, driving your mother to distraction with the endless repetition of simple tunes, until one day you lost it, dropped it somewhere in the fields, and could not find it again despite hours of searching. You wept when you realized it was truly gone, and your father held you and told you that everything is lost eventually, that nothing lasts forever, but that the music the whistle made was real while it existed, and the memory of it would last longer than the object itself. You understand that better now, now that you are older and have lost so many things, so many people. Your father is gone. Your mother is gone. Most of the people you knew as a child are gone, dead or moved away, or simply faded into the distance of memory, until you are no longer certain whether you actually remember them or only remember the idea of them. But the work continues, the carving, the shaping, the transformation of raw material into useful object. And in this continuity there is comfort, there is meaning, there is a connection to all the people who have done this work before you and all the people who will do it after you are gone. The spoon is nearly finished now, the basic form complete, and you turn your attention to the final details, using the knife to shave away the last rough spots, to round off the edges, to create the subtle curves and transitions that make the object pleasant to hold and use. You work the wood until it is smooth to the touch, until it flows under your fingers without catching or snagging, until it feels alive, warm, organic. Then you reach for a scrap of rough cloth, a piece of old sacking, and you begin to polish the wood, rubbing it vigorously to create friction, to burnish the surface, to bring out the natural luster of the ash. The wood begins to glow, taking on a soft sheen that is not reflective but somehow luminous, as if it is generating its own light from within. This burnishing also compresses the wood fibers slightly, making the surface harder and more resistant to staining and moisture, extending the life of the spoon. It is a simple technique, but effective. One more piece of knowledge passed down through generations, one more small skill in the vast repertoire of skills that make up the shepherd's craft. When you are satisfied, when the spoon feels right in your hand and looks right to your eye, you hold it up to the firelight, examining it from all angles, checking for any flaws you might have missed. But there are none, or none that matter, and you feel the quiet satisfaction that comes from work completed well, from an intention realized, from raw material transformed into something useful and even beautiful in its simplicity. You set the spoon aside on the shelf, where it joins the cup and the other few utensils you own, and you gather up the shavings from the floor, the pale curls of ash wood that have accumulated during the carving. You could throw them into the fire. They would burn quickly and hot, but you do not yet, because the smell of them is too pleasant, too fresh and clean, and you want to enjoy it a little longer. Instead, you place them in a small pile near the stove, and their scent fills the hut, mixing with the smell of peat smoke and wool and dog and all the other smells that define this space. Later, before you sleep, you will add them to the fire, but for now they are just shavings, just wood, just the evidence of work done and time well spent. Your hands are tired now from the fine motor control required by carving, and you flex your fingers, stretching them, working out the small cramps and tensions. The knuckles are stiff. They are always stiff, especially in cold weather, and you know that in a few more years they will be worse, that eventually the work you do with your hands will become difficult, perhaps impossible, that you will have to find other ways to occupy your evenings. But that is future worry, not present worry, and you push it aside, returning your attention to the immediate moment, to the here and now of the warm hut and the crackling fire and the dogs sleeping peacefully, and the flock settled outside under the rising moon. Your stomach reminds you that you have not eaten since midday, and even then it was only a handful of oats mixed with cold water, eaten while walking, barely enough to count as a meal. You are hungry now, properly hungry, and you turn to the small store of food you keep in a wooden box wedged into the corner of the hut, protected from mice and weather. The box contains little, you keep little, because food does not last long up here without spoiling, and what you have must be things that keep well, things that resist rot and mold and the attention of vermin. There is hard cheese, a wedge of it wrapped in cloth, made from sheep's milk by the women in the village, pressed and aged until it is dense and crumbly and sharp-tasting. There is bread, though it is several days old now, the crust hard and the interior beginning to dry out, but still edible, still nourishing. And there is an apple, a small withered thing from last autumn's harvest, kept in the cool corner of the hut where it has lasted through the winter and into the spring, though it is soft now, and the skin is wrinkled and spotted. But it is still an apple, still carries that particular sweet tart taste that is like memory made edible, like the ghost of orchards and sunshine and the turning of seasons. You take out these items, these simple components of your evening meal, and you arrange them on a wooden board that serves as a plate. The quantities are small, the cheese perhaps the size of your thumb, the bread a crust that fits in your palm, the apple requiring only 3 bites to consume. But it is enough, more than enough, because you have learned over the years that enough is not about volume, not about being full to the point of discomfort, but about satisfaction, about having consumed what your body needs and no more. You eat slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed, cutting small pieces of cheese with your knife and placing them on your tongue, letting them dissolve slowly, appreciating the complex flavor, the sharpness, the slight granular texture. The bread you tear with your hands, pulling off small chunks and chewing them thoroughly, working your jaw to break down the tough crust, mixing it with saliva until it becomes soft enough to swallow. The apple you save for last, a small reward, a sweet note to end the meal. You cut it into quarters with your knife, removing the core and the few seeds that rattle inside the dried chambers, and you eat each quarter slowly, chewing the soft flesh, feeling it collapse and release its juice, faint now but still present, still recognizably apple. Meg watches this process with the focused attention that dogs give to any activity involving food, her eyes tracking every movement of your hands, her nose working, cataloging the smells. She does not beg. You have trained her not to beg, but her desire is obvious, is written in every line of her body, in the intensity of her gaze, in the slight movement of her tail. When you finish the apple, you toss her a small piece of the bread crust, an end piece that is too hard even for your strong teeth, and she catches it in midair with a snap of her jaws, then settles down to work on it, grinding it between her back teeth, her eyes half closing with the pleasure of having food to occupy her. You watch her for a moment, this companion who asks so little and gives so much, and you feel a rush of affection for her loyalty, for her uncomplicated nature, for the simplicity of her needs and the generosity of her service. She is a good dog, perhaps the best dog you have ever worked with, and you are grateful for her presence, for the way she makes this solitary life less solitary, for the warmth she provides that has nothing to do with physical heat. The meal is finished quickly, as all meals are when the portions are small and there is no one to talk to, no reason to linger. You brush the crumbs from the board and put it away, and you drink the last of the tea from this morning, cold now but still pleasant, still carrying a hint of the leaves' bitter flavor. The fire in the stove has burned down again, and you add more peat, building it up for the night, knowing that the temperature will drop as the hours pass, and you will want the heat when you wake in the darkness, when the cold has crept into your bones and the world outside is frost and stillness. But before you settle for the night, before you give yourself over to sleep, you step outside one more time, drawn by some impulse you cannot quite name, some need to see the sky, to stand under the stars, to remember that you are not just in this hut, on this hillside, in this valley, but also in the world under the cosmos, part of something vast and incomprehensible and beautiful. The night is fully dark now, the kind of darkness that does not exist in the village, where the fires and candles of 30 cottages create a faint glow that softens the blackness, that makes the night less absolute. But up here there is no competing light, no luminous sky glow, no softening of the darkness. And when you look up, when you let your eyes adjust fully to the absence of light, the sky reveals itself in all its glory. The stars are everywhere, thousands upon thousands of them, more than you could ever count, more than you could look at in a lifetime of looking. They fill the sky from horizon to horizon, sharp white points against the pure black void. And they do not twinkle up here the way they do when viewed from the valley, but shine with a steady, unwavering light that seems almost aggressive in its clarity. And there, stretching across the sky like a river of light, like a road made of stars, is the great band that you know some people call the Milky Way, though you have also heard it called the Sky Path and the River of Souls and a dozen other names, each culture and each time inventing its own explanation for this luminous mystery. To you it looks like a cloud, like smoke, like something both solid and insubstantial, a thing that exists but has no clear boundaries, that fades at the edges into the blackness of space. It is beautiful in a way that makes your chest tight, that makes you aware of something beyond the daily round of work and survival, something transcendent, something that makes all human concerns seem small and temporary and almost irrelevant. You stand there looking up, your neck craned back, your mouth slightly open, breathing the cold night air, feeling the vastness of the universe pressing down on you, feeling yourself shrink to insignificance, to a single point of consciousness, on a single hillside, on a single planet, in an infinity of space. It should be terrifying, this sense of smallness, this awareness of your utter inconsequence in the grand scheme of existence. But it is not terrifying, it is freeing, because if you are so small, so insignificant, then your troubles are equally small. Your fears and worries and concerns are like dust motes in a cathedral, briefly visible in a beam of light, but ultimately meaningless, ultimately destined to settle and be forgotten. And yet, at the same time you are also aware that you are here, you exist. You are conscious and alive and capable of seeing this beauty, capable of being moved by it. And that consciousness, that awareness, is itself a kind of miracle, a thing so unlikely and so precious that it transforms insignificance into something else, something that has value simply by virtue of existing. The hut behind you, small and humble and perched on its iron wheels, seems even smaller when viewed against this cosmic backdrop, seems like a child's toy, a box that could be picked up and moved with one hand. And yet it is your home, your shelter, your small claim on existence, and the fact that it is small does not make it unimportant, does not diminish its value, because it is scaled to you, to your needs, to your life. This is the paradox you live with every night, the simultaneous awareness of vastness and intimacy, of insignificance and significance, of being both a tiny speck in an infinite universe and the center of your own experience, the point around which your particular world revolves. A meteor streaks across the sky, a brief line of light that appears and disappears in less than a second, and you make a wish, an old habit from childhood, though you cannot remember now what wish you made, cannot hold on to the thought long enough to articulate it even to yourself. But the gesture feels important, feels like a small assertion of hope, of the belief that wishes matter, that intentions have power, that the universe, for all its vastness and indifference, might still be listening. The cold is seeping into you now, making your fingers numb, making your toes ache inside your boots, and you know it is time to go inside, to return to the warmth, to prepare for sleep. But you linger for one more moment, drinking in the sight of the stars, storing it away in memory, adding it to the collection of night skies you have witnessed from this spot, each one unique, each one the same. Then you turn and push aside the canvas door and step back into the hut, and the warmth envelops you like an embrace, and the light from the fire seems almost bright after the darkness outside, and Meg lifts her head to acknowledge your return before settling back into sleep. You bar the door, the same simple ritual as every night, and you move to the bed, this narrow shelf built into the wall of the hut, this place where you have slept for 5 years now, this small territory that is entirely yours. The bed frame is rough-hewn oak, the same wood as the walls, fitted together with mortise and tenon joints that have swollen and larked over time until they are as solid as if the whole thing had been carved from a single piece. The base of the bed is rope, thick hemp rope woven in a tight crisscross pattern that provides support with some give, some flexibility, so that it shapes itself to your body rather than forcing your body to conform to it. The rope is old, older than the hut probably, and it creaks slightly when you sit on it, a familiar sound that is part of the nightly routine, part of the settling in. On top of the rope is the mattress, if it can be called that, a large sack made from rough canvas and stuffed with a mixture of straw and heather, gathered fresh each autumn and replenished as needed when the filling becomes compressed and loses its cushioning. The mattress is lumpy, uneven, with areas that are soft and areas that are hard, and you have learned over the years which sleeping positions work best, how to arrange your body to avoid the lumps, how to nestle into the softer spots. Over the straw mattress are sheepskins, 3 of them, layered one on top of the other, fleece side up so that you sleep on wool, on the soft curly fur that still smells faintly of the animals it came from. The sheepskins are warm, remarkably warm, providing insulation from below that prevents the cold from seeping up through the mattress, and they are soft in a way that the straw is not, conforming to your shape, cushioning your bones. The bed is narrow, barely wider than your shoulders, and when you lie down in it, you cannot stretch out your arms without touching the walls on either side. This narrowness might seem confining, but to you it feels safe, feels like being held, like being swaddled the way infants are swaddled, wrapped tight so they cannot flail, so they feel secure and protected. You sit on the edge of the bed now and pull off your boots, the stiff leather resisting, requiring effort to remove. Your feet are pale and wrinkled when they emerge, the skin soft and slightly damp from being enclosed all day, and they smell strong, the smell of sweat and wool and work. You flex your toes, feeling them spread and relax, and the relief is immediate and profound. You remove the outer layer of your clothing, the felted tunic, pulling it over your head and hanging it on one of the wall hooks. Beneath it, you wear a thinner under tunic, undyed linen that is soft from many washings, and this you keep on, this and your leggings, because the night will be cold, and the fire will die down, and you will need all the warmth you can manage. You lie down on the bed, pulling the heavy wool blanket over yourself, the same blanket you have used for years, woven in a pattern of brown and cream, thick and slightly scratchy but effective, capable of holding heat even when it is wet, even when the temperature drops below freezing. The blanket is heavy enough that you feel its weight pressing down on you, and this weight is comforting, makes you feel grounded, anchored, secure. The hut is warm from the fire, almost too warm, and you know that in an hour or two you will wake and find it cold and will pull the blanket tighter and perhaps add more peat to the stove. But for now the warmth is pleasant, is exactly right, and you feel your body beginning to relax, beginning to release the tension of the day, beginning the slow descent into sleep. But then the wind picks up, as it so often does at night, coming down from the high peaks to the north, funneling through the valleys, gaining speed and power as it moves across the open moors. You hear it first as a distant sound, a low moaning that grows gradually louder, and then it hits the hut, a gust that makes the whole structure shudder, makes the walls creak, makes the canvas door rustle and snap. The hut rocks slightly on its wheels, a gentle motion, barely perceptible but present, a swaying that reminds you that this structure is not fixed to the ground, not rooted like a house, but mobile, temporary, balanced on its iron chassis like a ship on water. The comparison is apt, because lying here in the rocking hut, listening to the wind, you feel very much like you are at sea, floating on a green ocean of grass and heather, adrift in a current you cannot control. The motion is soothing rather than disturbing, a gentle rocking that is like being rocked in a cradle, like being a child again in your mother's arms, and you find yourself timing your breathing to match the rhythm of the swaying. inhaling as the hut tilts one way, exhaling as it tilts back. The wind continues, coming in waves, gusts followed by lulls, followed by more gusts, and each wave makes the hut rock a little, makes the timbers creak and settle, makes you aware of the thinness of the walls that separate you from the elements, the fragility of this shelter, the miracle that it keeps you warm and dry and safe. But the hut does keep you safe, has kept you safe through countless nights of wind and rain and snow, through storms that bent trees and tore thatch from cottage roofs in the village, through cold snaps that froze water in buckets and killed livestock in the fields. The hut is stronger than it looks, has survived longer than most structures built by human hands, and you trust it. Trust the old oak and the iron wheels and the craftsmanship of whoever built it all those decades ago. The wind brings with it sounds, carries them from far away, from the valleys and ridges and hidden places of the hills. You hear the sound of water, a stream running full with recent rain, the tumbling rush of it faint but distinct. You hear the sound of wind in different types of vegetation, the soft susurrus of grass, the sharper rattle of heather, the occasional groan of a stressed tree branch. And then you hear other sounds, sounds that are not wind or water but living things, creatures of the night moving through their own dark world, pursuing their own purposes. An owl hoots, the sound coming from somewhere to the east, a long, low call that speaks of hunting, of patience, of the endless search for prey. The owl calls again, and this time you can hear the slightly different tone that means a second owl is answering, the two birds calling back and forth in their ancient dialogue. Meg hears it too, you can tell by the way her ears prick up, by the way her head rises slightly from her paws. She is alert now, listening, monitoring, but she is not alarmed, not concerned, because owls are not a threat, not to sheep, not to shepherds, not to sheepdogs. The owls are simply part of the night, part of the fabric of sounds that makes up the nocturnal world. Then there is another sound, further away but still clear in the cold air, a sharp barking that is unmistakably a fox. The sound is eerie, almost human, like a woman screaming, and it raises the hairs on the back of your neck, even though you have heard it 100 times, 1,000 times. The fox barks again, 3 times in rapid succession, and then there is silence, and you wonder what the fox is doing, whether it is hunting, whether it is calling to a mate, whether it is simply announcing its presence to the night. Meg's ears are fully forward now, her body tense, and you can sense her evaluating the sound, determining whether it requires action, whether she needs to go out and investigate, whether the fox represents a threat to the flock. You reach down and rest your hand on her shoulder, and she relaxes slightly at the touch, understanding the message. You are aware, you are monitoring, you will decide if action is needed. The fox does not bark again, and after a minute Meg settles back down, her head returning to her paws, her breathing becoming regular again. The fox is gone, or at least silent, moved on to other business in the vast night. You are the guardian here, you and the dog, the protectors of the flock, the watchers in the darkness. It is a role you take seriously, a responsibility you never fully set down, even in sleep. Part of your mind is always alert, always listening, always ready to respond to trouble. But tonight there is no trouble. Tonight the sounds are all normal, all part of the expected pattern of the night, and you can relax, can allow yourself to drift, can trust that nature is calm, that the balance is maintained. The fire in the stove is dying down now. You can hear the change in its sound, the crackling becoming quieter, more intermittent, as the peat is consumed and begins to collapse into coals. The light in the hut is fading, the bright yellow flames giving way to the soft red glow of embers, and the shadows on the walls are no longer dancing, but still, deepening, merging with the darkness. You could get up and add more fuel to the fire, could keep the hut bright and warm through the night, but you choose not to. Choose to let the fire fade, because the darkness is part of sleep, is necessary for deep rest, and the moderate cold that will come in a few hours will not harm you, will just make you pull the blanket closer. will give you the satisfaction of warmth earned rather than warmth given freely. The red glow from the stove is beautiful, is the color of the inside of your eyelids when you close your eyes, and you watch it for a while. Watch the slow pulsing of the coals as air moves over them. Watch the way the light shifts and changes, and you feel yourself beginning to drift, beginning to lose the thread of conscious thought, beginning the slide into sleep. Meg's breathing has changed too, become deeper, more regular, the rhythm of true sleep rather than resting, and you find yourself matching your breath to hers, inhaling when she inhales, exhaling when she exhales, the two of you breathing together like a single organism, like parts of a whole. The synchronization of your breathing is unconscious but profound, creates a sense of connection, of not being alone even in solitude. And it is this perhaps more than anything else that allows you to fully relax, to let go of the day, to trust that the night will take care of itself, that you do not have to control everything, that you can simply be. Your body is heavy now, sinking into the sheepskins, the mattress molding around you, holding you, and you feel safe in a way that is absolute and uncomplicated. The safety of being in exactly the right place, of being exactly who you are meant to be, of having no questions about purpose or meaning or direction. The hut around you is a shell, a cocoon, a small warm bubble of existence in the vast cold universe. And inside this bubble you are protected, you are held, you are home. The walls keep out the wind and the rain and the cold, and the door keeps out the predators and the dangers, real or imagined, and the stove keeps out the deepest cold. And together these simple elements create a space where you can let down your guard, where you can be vulnerable, where you can sleep. The flock outside is safe, bedded down in their usual spot, the sheep huddled together for warmth, their wool keeping them warm even in temperatures that would kill a human in hours. They are designed for this life, bred over countless generations to thrive in these harsh conditions, and they do not need constant supervision, do not need you hovering over them every moment. But they do need you to be here, to be available, to be ready if something goes wrong. And this is why you sleep lightly, why you wake at unusual sounds, why you maintain your vigil even in unconsciousness. You are the shepherd, and the shepherd does not abandon the flock, does not choose his own comfort over their safety, does not forget for even a moment that their lives are his responsibility. But tonight all is well. Tonight the world is in order, and you can sleep, truly sleep, the deep restorative sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, that heals the body and refreshes the mind, that allows you to wake tomorrow ready for another day of the work you were born to do. The darkness is complete now, the fire reduced to the faintest glow, barely visible, and the hut is filled with a blackness that is almost tangible, almost solid, a presence rather than an absence. But you are not afraid of the dark, have never been afraid of it, because darkness is just the absence of light, nothing more, and in darkness you are safe, you are hidden, you are protected from eyes that might wish you harm. Your thoughts are fragmenting now, losing coherence, becoming dreamlike, images and sensations rather than words and logic. You see the hillside in summer, covered in purple heather. You feel the rough wool of a lamb's coat under your hands. You taste the sweetness of water from the spring. You hear the bell of the bellwether, that gentle clunking that means all is well. And then even these fragments fade, dissolve into the deeper darkness of true sleep, and you are gone, descended into the place where consciousness goes when it is not needed, when the body takes over the work of living, when breath and heartbeat and the slow processes of healing and restoration carry on without the interference of thought. The hut stands silent on the hillside, a small dark shape against the larger darkness of the night, and inside you sleep, wrapped in wool, sheltered by oak, warmed by the last heat of the dying fire. The dog sleeps beside you, her paws twitching occasionally in some dream of running, of herding, of work, and her breathing is the only sound in the hut besides your own. Outside, the wind continues its endless movement across the moors, bending the heather, stirring the grass, carrying the scent of sheep and earth and water across miles of empty land. The flock sleeps, 300 bodies generating their own warmth, their own small climate, safe in their numbers, and in the knowledge, instinctive and unquestioned, that the shepherd is near, that the dog is watching, that the night will pass and the morning will come. The moon travels across the sky, following its ancient path, casting its silver light on the sleeping world, on the hills and valleys, on the streams and rocks, on the hut and the flock and the sleeping shepherd. The stars wheel overhead in their slow dance, indifferent to human concerns, bearing witness to this small scene, this tiny drama of survival and duty and the simple act of living. And as the hours pass, and the night deepens, and the temperature drops toward its lowest point just before dawn, the hut remains what it has always been: a sanctuary, a shelter, a small assertion of human presence in a landscape that is vast and wild and ancient. Inside, warmth lingers even as the fire dies. Inside, sleep comes easy and deep. Inside, the shepherd rests, his work done for now, his flock safe, his world in order. And as the moon travels across the sky, the hut stands silent on the hill. The flock is safe, the dog is watching, and you are warm. Sleep well.